episode 4, it's cleanup, and I'm excited because we're going into Photoshop. Now, a lot of people find Photoshop scary because it's a lot more complicated than Lightroom, or it can be, but we're going to go through 3 simple tips in how to clean up your images. First one will be removing dust spots from the image. These you often see in the sky and look like kind of weird circles that are caused by spots of dust on your camera lens. The second one is going to be removing distractions from the image. So this could be things like rocks or stones if you're on the beach that are bright and draw the eye, people if needs be if they're having an impact on the image, or any other things that can be removed and make the image more simplistic and cleaner. The third thing we're going to look at is haloing. So that is when you get areas that are lighter than they should be around objects such as buildings or mountains. This is often caused by Lightroom attempting to create contrast in an image, and in doing so it gives a light area around a strong object to try and make it clearer to see, but it looks unnatural. So we're going to show you the way to fix that. All these 3 tips are really simple and don't require any prior knowledge, so let's go. So here we are in Photoshop, and the first thing we're going to look at is removing dust spots from an image. Now if you look at this image, you might not be able to see them too clearly. I can see there's one there, but there might be some others. And although this isn't too much of a problem because you don't think you can see them too clearly, if you were to do any more editing, then they might show up. Or if you sent them to print, then that might be an issue afterwards because the printer might reproduce your image in a way that shows up the dust spots more clearly. Now the tool we're going to use for this is the spot heal brush, which should be here on the left hand side and looks like a plaster. If you don't have it, look around this sort of area. If you click and hold on any of these items, you can see the other different options that you can use for that tool. So we want the spot heal brush tool. We also want to make sure that sample all layers is ticked here at the top, because what that means is that we're creating a new layer to work on, and we're editing what's called non-destructively. So we're not editing the original image, and that way if we want to, we can remove these edits or edit them later by just brushing out that layer or deleting the layer entirely. So now we've got that tool selected, we could, with a big soft brush, just colour over and remove it. But that's only affecting ones that we can see. So the easiest way I find to see things like dust spots in Lightroom, especially in the sky, is to come down and create a new layer. First thing I'm going to do is create a new levels layer. So we're coming down here, clicking on this, and then going on levels. Now what this does is add a layer that we will delete later that's going to edit how the image looks in a way that brings out the dust spots and shows them a lot clearer. So what we do is we bring up the dark part of the image, shift the centre a bit to the right, bring the left in a little bit. You're basically playing around with these 3 to try and get the most contrast in the sky. It's very easy to kind of have it fully white or fully black if you don't pay attention to it. So now that we've done about there, what I can see is there are multiple dust spots on the image. So if I zoom in, using the nav pane in the top right, create a new layer using the plus symbol in the bottom right, and then drag this layer below the levels layer. What this means is that it won't pick up the levels adjustment layer that we've just added. So all you can do now is very simply just paint over these dots, make sure it looks smooth, have a scan through the sky for any more, there's a few up here, and then that looks a lot better. So we can then click on the levels layer, click on the bin, that's gone, and then that's tidied up that part of the image, and that's as simple as it is. So the next thing we're going to do is delete all the distractions from the image. We're going to do this again with the spot heal tool, but without the levels adjustment layer. So the first thing you can see on this image that might be a distraction is, as we saw earlier doing the dust spots, all these little dots, which I'm assuming are midges flying around above this lake. So again, all you're doing, use a tool slightly bigger than they are, just to scrub over and get rid of them. And you can see that sky is already a lot better. If we The next one you can see is in the water. There's loads of these little midges, loads of things that we might not want, some that we might want, such as this little reed and these two reeds here I quite like. So again, it's going through the same technique, starting in one corner and just brushing over them until they're gone. Now it's a lot easier to do this on very plain or gradiented backdrops like I'm using with either this water or the sky in this image. Sometimes you'll get to an edge of an item or something with a more complex background. Now you can still do it, and a lot of the times the heel brush picks that out, like it's doing quite well here, but sometimes it'll give you more of a blurry effect, so it'll take an approximation of what's in the image and just create a blurred group of colours. One of the ways to get around that is using the clone stamp tool. Clone stamp tool is here, click on it, give us a good sized brush, and I'm going to look at this distraction here on that green element. Now you want to hold Alt and click a pattern that is fairly similar to the area you want to replace. So I'm going to press Alt, click there, then move across to the area I want to replace, and then just paint it in. Again, with this tool, we're making sure that all layers is selected, and then we can go along and paint anything along that line. And as you're painting, you can see this cross. That's what it's using as a reference point to paint from. And because you're using a new layer, it means you can hide that layer and show it again to see the difference that you've made. Now I'm going to go through this entire image, speed it up so you don't have to watch all of that, and show you the finished result. Now that looks much better to me. You can see the before and the after, and how much of a difference that cleanup really gives to your image. What we can see as well, if we turn the background layer off, is all these dots, all the replacements that we put over the top of the image. So you can see really how much we have replaced on the image without having a notable difference on the overall look of the image, but just cleaning up those things that we don't want in the image because they're distractions or they're unpleasant. So the final thing we're going to look at is haloing. So there's one really obvious example of that in this image, but it normally comes around buildings and mountains, that sort of thing. So we can see here in the back, just where the sun's gone down behind the ridge, there's a very, very white area. Now some of this will be the sun, some of this will be the post-processing which has caused it, but either way I'd like to make it a little bit darker to match the rest of the image. Now what I'm going to do is create a new layer, because then again we can edit non-destructively. Select the clone tool that we were using earlier, select an area just above where we're going to want to fill in. Make the brush a little bit bigger, make sure it's still very soft, and then just paint over the top. And it doesn't matter if this is rough, doesn't matter if it goes over what we were on before. We can go along this ridge line, a little bit more there, a little bit of it over this area, and across the left looks good. Now although this looks very strange, we can fix that in one simple thing, which is coming down to this button here that says normal, and this is the blending mode for the layer, and all we do is select darken. Now what that's doing is that if there's anything darker on the layers below our new layer, it will show them, but if there's not, it will show what we've painted on that layer. Then we can see how we've filled in this area up here. I'll do, group those layers, and then you can see with the three changes we've made, we've gone from that starting image to this finished one, which although it doesn't have a huge change, it makes it look a lot more professional and simplifies the image massively, ready for the rest of the production we're going to do in Photoshop. So that was how to quickly remove all distractions from your image using Photoshop. In the next episode, called Masking, we're going to be selectively editing various areas of photographs. This will be the lights versus dark, so editing just the light areas in Photoshop, also editing specific colours in specific areas in Photoshop and using masks to do that, so taking out bright colourful signs and things like that from photographs, And finally, additional masking so that we can edit a certain area of the photograph by colouring in the area of the image that we want to affect. So if you could like this video, if you could, comment if you've got any questions, and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next week for episode 5, Mask. Oh!